Alrighty. So I just first want to see if we have any new clubs in general, or new club presidents or leaders. If anyone wanted to raise their hand and introduce themselves, please feel free. See Kip, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I'm Kip Aishan. I was appointed by John Laughlin, our new club president, to be the associate member today. So I'm here joining you for the first time and happy to be here.
Great, thanks for being here. Anyone else?
Well, I'm Eugene Mullally, and I'm from the Foothills Democratic Club in La Mesa. And I was asked to, they just appointed me, they just made the mistake recently of appointing me as the treasurer of our club. So they asked me to attend this session today, which I think will help me quite a bit. So.
Great, thanks for being here.
Who I haven't met yet, it's good to see you. So, and then good to see the others that I have met.
Great. Ruby, I see your hand raised.
Sorry, trying to unmute on a phone is difficult. My name's Ruby Baker. I'm part of the San Diego Education Alliance. We just got chartered officially last council, and then or the committee, excuse me. And I just wanted to share that since we're all mostly educators, that we won't have a meeting from May, but we will have one for April. So and Kate's on here, so she asked me to speak on the club's behalf.
Great.
And the VP. Thank you.
Paula, are you there? Paula Hall?
I am.
Oh, great.
Yes, I'm Paula Hall. I'm the treasurer for the Imperial Beach Democratic Club, and I am here to learn.
Great.
So,
and then I see Steve.
Hi, everybody. Steve Yashanka. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I am also with the La Mesa Foothills Democratic Club with G. Mullally. I'm just a regular person, not a club. I'm a board member, not an officer like G. Mullally. But the club president has asked me to be here to represent her. Tina Reinberg's asked me to represent. So happy to be here. Welcome, everybody. Let me be quiet.
Great, thanks. Okay, and then I'm going to do announcements if there are any elected officials or party officers, like Michelle. Michelle wanted to say something.
I love your unmute. I know. Thank you, Cody. I love your unmute. She's my savior. So good morning. I just wanted to touch base with people, and if you have any feedback about the recent convention, CDB convention, please feel free to give me a call, because I am trying to give feedback back. There were a lot of concerns around Hopin, but whatever feedback would be appreciated. The next e-board meeting is at this point planned in August, and the date is not even solidified. So the regional meeting will take place at sometime in July, although I might have one in June. And that's really it. I mean, just the normal people really need help with the Jewish Family Services and the ACLU with the asylum seekers. So if anyone can help with that, that's going on every single day, as well as donations and volunteers are needed at the convention center for the unaccompanied minors, and that's being done by South Bay Community Services. Thanks.
Now, someone put in the chat asking, how do we give feedback regarding the convention?
So you have two ways. If somebody could put my telephone number into the chat, that's the easy way through me, which is 619-888-4974, 619-888-4974. But the other way is you can write to operations@cadem.org. And that will go to the main people that were working with the logistics, which is Emma Harper, Esteban Rojas, Unique Wilson, and Moises, and I don't know Moises' last name.
Great. Also, Michelle, I don't know if you already saw this, but I saw someone post on Facebook about the CDP committee applications are open. Did you see about that?
Oh, I did not know about that. So anybody that has an interest in any of the 9 standing committees, again, go to www.cadem.org and check out the standing committees. Anybody that has an interest to serve on any of those, I don't know if they have actual application or if it's just writing, emailing. Again, you can do that operations@cadem.org. I'm sure you could do rusty@cadem.org to say that you have an interest. Thanks, Cody.
Yeah, I think they said it's applications are through Friday, June 4th at 5. I don't see an application link yet, but we can probably figure that out, Michelle.
I did receive that email. I received that email last night. So it might be coming out in batches.
Awesome. Thanks, Judy. And then Georgine, did you have a question for Michelle? I see your hand raised. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, mute, I think. Michelle?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I'm sorry. It just took a little bit longer. Yeah, Michelle, you gave a name of an organization that's helping out the convention center. What was the name of the organization to contact if you want to serve?
South Bay Community Services. They're the ones that coordinate everything with the unaccompanied minors.
And they do have a website, or is that?
I don't have it memorized, but if you Google it, I'm
okay.
Sure it can't be hard. If you have any trouble, call me.
Thanks, Michelle.
Great. And then I see our party chair's hand raised. Will, if you want to.
Yes, so the application is open. There is an application link that you have to use, so it's not by email or individual.
I do see it,
yeah, it's in the email. The email is titled, I just looked at it. I had to find it because it went to my spam. ADEM Standing Committee Applications Now Open is the title of the email. It came from info@cadem.org. So if you are not getting the emails from that, you have to like do something in order to whitelist it or keep it from going to your spam. There's also another step of the process that they've added, which is a recommendations process, which allows for party leaders to recommend individuals to serve on the committee. I hate it because it's an individual form. So if you have like a bunch of people you want to recommend, you'd have to fill out the individual forms. I think that's for the officers to sort of, or at least the chair to see, to like help expand, or the people who are recommending or whatever, I don't know. But you can request recommendations. So what I will do for our party as delegates I will put out a call to our entire DSCC delegates to indicate that, to me at least, and to that you are running, that you are seeking these individual committee appointments, so that I can then choose to recommend some of y'all, or as many of y'all as I can, so we can have San Diego representation.
Great. Thank you. Okay, if there aren't any other electeds or party officers, then I want to go ahead and have Luke, if you're there, give a quick announcement regarding the Community Service Committee.
Okay, thank you, Cody.
Yeah.
All right, good morning, everyone. Those who don't know me, my name is Luke Tesluk. I'm the co-chair of the new Community Service Committee, along with Diana Aguirre, and I have a couple of updates. One of our goals is to work with clubs where we can in community service, and we have a cleanup schedule in Spring Valley on June 6th, and our next meeting is this next Friday at 5 p.m. And I'll drop my contact info in the chat, and looking forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lou. Okay, let me see. I think that's it for announcements, and then I'm gonna go ahead and ask Judy if you want to start your presentation.
Cody, is this also for candidates? Because I think there is a candidate that had wanted to announce.
Sure, we can go ahead with if there are any candidates. If you want to raise your hand. Yeah, okay, I see Kent.
Thanks. Yeah, I think maybe I'm the only one, but I'll make it quick. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kent Lee. I'm just reintroducing myself as a candidate running for San Diego City Council to represent District 6 to build a stronger, more compassionate, more inclusive San Diego. I'm a first-generation Asian American, a 15-year resident in Mira Mesa, where my wife and I are raising our 2 young children, possibly screaming in the background. I am professionally the executive director of Pacific Arts Movement, which presents the San Diego Asian Film Festival, a longtime board member of the Mira Mesa Community Planning Group, and also the co-chair of the San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, which is working to combat hate and racism impacting the API community during the pandemic. I'm sure Judy's going to talk about this today because it's Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month and a pretty critical time to reflect upon the impact and history of that community. For me, it's especially pertinent because San Diego D6 is about 34% API. And just last week, I was proud to announce endorsements from over 120 AAPI civic, business, and community leaders from across San Diego. And maybe just one thing that I'll leave here is that something that I have been working to advance is really thinking about equity from a city level. An example of that that's really been frustrating me is juxtapositioning the news that the San Diego Symphony, for example, was awarded a COVID-19 city relief grant. At the same time, they announced raising nearly $100 million towards their new Bayfront concert venue. So look forward to sharing more about myself in the months ahead, and I'll leave my info in the chat. Thanks. Have a good day.
Sorry, I muted myself. Judy, if you want to go ahead.
Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen first. Okay, make sure. Slide from the beginning. Okay, good morning, everyone. Cody, thank you so much for the opportunity for allowing me the space to share my experience with my fellow Democrats. I'm Chinese American and I immigrated from Hong Kong in 1974. So I have personally experienced quite a bit of anti-Asian racism in this country for several decades now. Prejudice against Asian Americans have roots in our country's history. When Americans become fearful, they lash out and find someone to scapegoat. Historically, Asian American Pacific Islanders, or AAPIs, which is easier to say, have been blamed for calamities in the US. The current explosion of hate incidents and hate crimes against AAPIs is a consequence of this pandemic's heavy toll on American society, fueled by the hateful rhetoric of some powerful individual who will remain nameless. We always knew that AAPI hate incidents were underreported for various reasons, language barrier and, afraid to bring attention to themselves. But now that there is national attention, people are coming forward and the number has almost doubled. As you can see from our AAPI, Stop AAPI Hate website, the number has almost doubled. In our conversation about racism today, I'm going to highlight how the intersectionality of racism and misogyny threaten the safety of Asian American women Nearly 70% of the recent hate incidents and hate crimes are targeted at AAPI women. Here's a brief history, just to go through it quickly. Chinese laborers escaped the economic chaos in China in the 1850s. They came to California and became the main workforce that built out the transcontinental railroad from the West Coast. After its completion, the competition for jobs with this cheap labor force led to the Chinese massacre, where Chinese men were lynched and entire villages were burnt to the ground with women and children in it. And also later on, the Chinese Exclusion Act. And the Chinese Exclusion Act was not repealed until 1943. And I'll explain the Page Act in a little more detail in a later slide. And many of you are aware of the Japanese internment camps, where American citizens were stripped of all their rights, their properties, and locked up in concentration camps. And then fast forward to the 70s. We had an energy crisis in this country. People started buying smaller and more fuel-efficient cars from Japan. Vincent Chin, a 27-year-old Chinese man, was mistaken as Japanese, pursued and brutally murdered by 2 auto workers in Detroit with a baseball bat. The perpetrators got off with just a $3,000 fine because the judge said, "These are not men you put in jail." So here again, Asian Americans were scapegoated for the energy crisis and the loss of jobs. And as you can see throughout history, anti-Asian hate is cyclical. We are convenient scapegoats. Growing up in Hong Kong, I know that my mom visited a massage therapist for chronic arthritis. Acupressure helped restore my mom's health. I want people to think about this when they think about Asian-owned spas and Asian massage therapists. Many of these hardworking women are providers for their family. Not only do they break through knots in our backs, they push through socioeconomic barriers to improve the lives of their families. These are strong women. They are grandmothers, mothers, sisters. They should be valued for their hard work. But that's not the story the media told. The shooter in Atlanta described himself as having a sex addiction and that those spas were a temptation. Too many people assumed that spas he targeted were associated with prostitution, jumping to the conclusion that Asian-owned spas provide cover for sex work not only ignores studies that suggest workers are sexually victimized by customers. It also reflects the double standards immigrants face all too often. My poor hairdresser and her staff are propositioned frequently in the nail salon she owns. And I have to kind of help her with some assertiveness training. The number of Asian spas have grown rapidly in the US. I personally get treatments at a Chinese-owned spa that offers acupressure. I also have many friends who enjoy soaking their tired feet and undoing the stress of their jobs at Asian-owned spas. But history will explain why these assumptions are commonplace. We cannot ignore how racism and sexism provided the context for the shooter in Atlanta. Preceding the Chinese Exclusion Act, there was a lesser known act named the Page Act of 1875. This was enacted to exclude any Chinese immigrant deemed undesirable. Page targeted Chinese women, whom he thought were universally engaged in prostitution. The Page Act became the most successful effort in the late 19th century to selectively target and exclude Chinese women from immigrating to the United States on the grounds that as possible sex workers, they were a corrupting force to the nation. With the Page Act's passage, virtually all Chinese women were selectively denied entry into the United States because of their race and gender. One of the earliest examples of legal exclusion of an immigrant population based on race and gender. And that predates the Chinese Exclusion Act by nearly a decade. This legislation is important in women's history in the United States because it laid the foundation for a country's hypersexualization of Chinese women and the denigration in the media. Chinese women were seen as a threat to the institution of marriage, a danger to white males, and stigmatized as being unclean. Well, most of the Chinese women had no affiliation with prostitution. They immigrated for better lives and economic stability at the height of the gold rush in California. Racism doesn't always come in the form of a white hood. I immigrated from Hong Kong in 1974 to the US. Asians were a rarity back then. I was stared at like I was from another planet. A year later, after the fall of Saigon, things got much worse for me. Subtle racism became overt racism. Asian women were fair game. We were assaulted verbally and physically, or propositioned. I can write about a book about those experiences. But with all the recent hate crimes, I now carry pepper spray in my purse. Asian American women are often stereotyped as quiet, subservient, and obedient, or we're the diabolical dragon ladies. We can't win. We don't have time to get into how Hollywood had helped perpetuate those stereotypes. One inclusive Oscar show does not wipe out the decades of stereotypes. If you have time, please Google the Samantha Bee's video called Hollywood's Walk of Shame, the history of Asian stereotypes in pop culture. She did a fabulous job of explaining that part of our history. While there is a long history of racism against Asian Americans, we also have a long history of resiliency. I want to share with you 3 of our pioneering Asian American women whose giant shoulders we stand on, especially in light of May being the AAPI Heritage Month celebration. I want to share with you their accomplishments. Patsy Takemoto Mink. She stands 5 feet tall, but she's larger than life. She grew up on a Maui sugar plantation. Patsy was rejected from medical school because she was a woman. Then she attended law school. She was one of 2 women and the only woman of color in her class. In 1965, Patsy rose to become the first Asian American woman and woman of color in the United States Congress. While in Congress, she spoke up for poor people and for women. Those were not popular topics. A firecracker and a fighter, she pushed the limits of what was acceptable, speaking out against the Vietnam War. Her view was that it was a civil war and that we have no business being over there. Well, that unpopular view didn't win her any friends in high places. She entered the 1972 presidential primary, making her the first woman of color to seek the nation's highest office. She co-authored Title IX with Edith Green, the landmark legislation that opened higher education and athletics to women. 98% of college sports budget went to men's sports. Coaches fought Title IX tooth and nail. They continue to fight it to this day. Patsy Mink served in Congress for a quarter of a century. In her lifetime, the percent of women in Congress rose from 1% to 15%. Hey, let's not stop until we get to 50%, okay? When she died in 2002, Title IX was renamed the Patsy Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act. This documentary I highly recommend. Patsy Mink Ahead of the Majority. It explores the remarkable political story of Patsy Mink, an Asian American woman battling racism and sexism, redefined American politics. Mink's political journey was quite lonely and difficult. She has to dispel stereotypes as a compliant Japanese female, She battled misogyny within her own Democratic Party, whose leaders disliked her independent style and openly maneuvered against her. She was on a TV show, and the male host asked the congresswoman from Hawaii to do a hula dance. Would they ever ask a man to do that? Her liberal politics, particularly her vocal opposition to the Vietnam War, was met with intense criticism. I met the young lady Kimberly Basford at the San Diego Asian Film Festival in 2009. She wrote, produced, and directed this documentary about a very remarkable woman. The daughter of Chinese immigrant, Marge Fong Yu was born in 1922 near Modesto, California. Her parents operated a laundry there and then later in San Francisco as well. She was a straight A student, but her high school counselor told her not to count on becoming a scientist because nobody would hire a Chinese person. In 1966, she was elected to the California State Assembly, representing Oakland and Castro Valley. She was the first Asian American woman elected to a state legislature in the entire country. She served for 4 terms. In 1974, Marge Fong Yu was elected as Secretary of State in California, becoming the first Asian American woman ever elected to a state constitutional office in this country. She served for 5 terms. She remained the only woman to serve as California Secretary of State until 2006, when voters elected Deborah Bowen. Marge Fong Yu resigned in 1994 when President Bill Clinton nominated her for an ambassadorship. In April of '69, Marge Fong Yu smashed a porcelain toilet with a sledgehammer on the steps of our state capitol building. To her, pay toilets symbolized the second-class status of women because urinals were free. In 1974, after 5 years of her tireless campaigning, California finally banned pay toilets in public buildings. Her actions opened a dialogue in the fight for equity. Whether it's razors, dry cleaning, or personal hygiene products, women pay more for gender-specific products than men. In 2019, California's Secretary of State building in Sacramento was named the Marge Fong Yu Secretary of State building. This is the first state-owned building to be named after an Asian American woman. During her 2 decades as Secretary of State, she was credited with introducing California to include candidate statements and ballot pamphlets, voter registration by mail, voter registration at DMVs, and providing absentee ballots to any voter requesting one. I'm very proud to say that I was able to vote for her numerous times on the California ballot. Tammy Duckworth was born in Thailand, a biracial daughter of a Thai Chinese mother and an American father. She spent her childhood moving between Thailand, Cambodia, Indonesia, and Singapore. Tammy went to high school and college in Hawaii, and then attended graduate school in Washington, D.C. and Illinois. Tammy's family moved to Hawaii when she was 16. They had to leave her mom behind in Asia because 1, they couldn't afford another plane ticket, and 2, mom didn't have the right immigration status. In Hawaii, her father was too proud to take low-level jobs, leaving the family homeless, and Tammy holding the family together, doing odd jobs on the streets of Oahu, and at the same time maintaining good grades in high school. Tammy Duckworth served as an Army lieutenant colonel and became one of only a handful of female helicopter pilots. She was in Iraq for 8 months before that fateful day. In 2004, she was shot down in her Black Hawk helicopter. The rocket-propelled grenade landed on her lap, severed both her legs, and pulverized her right arm. She spent 13 months at Walter Reed, recovering and learning how to walk to write again. I had the pleasure of meeting her at the 2008 convention in Denver at the API caucus. I've been a huge fan since then. This is a wonderful, wonderful book. Because of her advocacy for amputees while at Walter Reed, Tammy Duckworth was asked to serve at the Department of Veterans Affairs. She served in the House of Representatives from 2013 to 2016, and then she won a Senate seat in 2016. She's the junior senator from Illinois. And like I said, I love this book. Please, if you have a chance, read it. Every day is a gift. She's funny, she's determined, and she's just an all-around badass woman. And what a life story she has. My respect for her grew like 100 times after reading this book. While many of us are fearful of attacks like myself, we also have a great deal of hope for the future. That's why I'm an activist. We have to have hope. We can change our future. We want you, as our allies, to acknowledge what is happening to us. We want you to hear us, see us, and we want you to be true allies. We need you to bear witness like Darnella Frazier, the 17-year-old who had the presence of mind to record the critical 9 minutes and 29 seconds video. We want policies that will change this culture. Sorry, give me a sec. We want policies that will change the culture of hatred towards AAPI, Black and Brown sisters and brothers. Most importantly, we want our seat at the table. We want you, leaders of the Democratic Party, to help elect more Patsy Minks, Maj Fong Yus, Tammy Duckworth. Because, you know, representation matters is not just a hashtag to us. In and day out, this is what I see in the media. We are invisible. AAPIs are erased. We're not even part of the conversation on gender or racial equity. And I'll be damned if I sit idly by and accept this. So from protest to policy change, passing the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act was a good start. This legislation will assign an official in the Justice Department to review and expedite all reports of hate crimes related to the coronavirus and expand support for local and state law enforcement agencies responding to these hate crimes. It passed with bipartisan support on April 22nd. The vote was 94-1. You want to guess who that one vote against was? Josh Hawley. And as a retired teacher who taught for 3 decades, I strongly believe that education is key. The Asian American Education Project is an excellent resource for teachers. And I see that we now have an educator club. And this is, if you Google Asian American Education Project, there are all kinds of lesson plans that you can use for your classroom. And the Stop AAPI Hate website is our go-to website. It does not only offer resources for us, it also offers a lot of resources for our allies. And last but not least, I want to leave you with some food for thought, my fellow Democrats. To be a true ally, you have to be willing to share power with us. Do not erase us. Do not take away our representation in government. You know, the Massey Horonos, the Grace Meng, who authored the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. We need more people who look and sound like us to represent us in government. So thank you so much for this opportunity to share my hopes and dreams of overcoming AAPI hate with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. We really appreciate all of the work you put into this and for educating everyone. It's so important. So thank you. And I am recording this meeting. So if anyone didn't get a chance to see Judy's presentation, that will be sent out in the next newsletter as part of this recording. So Okay, great. So we'll go ahead then. So just so everyone knows for the rest of the agenda, I'm going ahead with our main presentation by Ryan Hurd on club finances, and then we'll do a couple reminders and any other announcements if people want to make those at the end. So I believe Ryan's on, and I need to make him a co-host. Let's see.
All right, I think I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Did you get the co-host ad there?
Yeah, and I can share screen and all that good stuff.
Yep, perfect. Thanks, Ryan.
Cool. Well, thank you, Cody. I really appreciate the invitation. And first, a big thanks again to Judy for preparing and sharing that presentation. I know you're supposedly retired, but we're all lucky that you never stopped teaching. So I know we all appreciate it. So I am always happy to share what I can in the way of this stuff. I know it's not the primary reason that y'all are active in the party or your clubs, but I know that you really want to get this right and stay on the up and up. So I do also have something I can share with you. Great. Happy to make this available to all of you to refer to later or to share with others in your club who could benefit from it. If you were part of the meeting where I did this a couple years ago, you can look forward to a lot of the classics today, but there's always something new. So this is updated as well to reflect that. Just to highlight what we're going over, broadly what the responsibilities of a club treasurer are. Glad to know that we have a few of you joining here today. Some of the distinctions between state and federal committees. We're going to spend some fair amount of time on that to help you determine which of those, if either, you might need to be. Contribution limits is something that I want to talk about a little more today than last time, because that's something that clubs can easily run into and run afoul of local laws that they might not even know about. Some best practices, and then a little bit of news and some Q&A. So I don't know that I'll be able to keep up with the chat if you all are putting stuff in there. So Cody, if you want to just jump in with any questions you think should be aired in the moment, you're welcome to. Otherwise, happy to take all those at the end. I'm going to try to keep this interesting, but it's always more interesting, of course, if it's interactive. So I hope we can hear from some of you and maybe some tips or experiences that you've had that everyone else will find interesting. So just a couple background things that I think are good to keep in mind. First and foremost, I think anyone who has to learn about and adhere to these rules will occasionally gripe about them. So we've just got to remember this stuff is here for a good reason. We believe in transparency when it comes to money and politics. It is often aspirational, but there are reasons for this, and so that can kind of help the medicine go down a little bit. And then importantly, my disclaimer is that I'm not a treasurer, I'm not a lawyer. I am glad to put out there some of the stuff that I've observed or learned along the way. But when it comes down to it, if you think you need professional advice, definitely get it. I'll be sharing a link that has some contact info for treasurers who we know about, political treasurers. And I think they'd all be happy to have an informal conversation with a club leader just about your situation and what your needs might be. So something to keep in mind. All right, well, first, it's just good to get our terms correct and figure out what kind of organization is a Democratic Club as a legal entity. So it is awfully important to be aware that even if you're chartered with the party, clubs are completely independent. You're responsible for everything you do and following all the rules that are out there. Part of the chartering relationship is that we try to help as much as we can and keep it easy for you. But that's an important frame for people to keep in mind. So technically speaking, any organization, no matter how loose it might be, whose purpose is political, is defined under Section 527 of the Internal Revenue Code. Typically, that means that you are tax exempt, but not a nonprofit that's charitable. So you may have run into some issues trying to book a public venue for a political meeting, and that's the reason, because there is that distinction in the federal tax law there. So some, but not all 527 organizations have to form a committee. So that's a somewhat more formal organization that is recognized and required by the state or the federal government, commonly known as a political action committee or PAC. I know that a good number of clubs currently do this and many don't, and we'll be getting into more of the details about what that means. So here are just some of the general responsibilities of a club treasurer. These are probably in your bylaws or in other written procedures. That's a really good idea to do if you don't currently, especially because, of course, there are natural transitions among club officers, including treasurers. This one does come with a lot of detail, a lot of history, a lot of actual files and paperwork that do need to be maintained, and that experience. So it's worth investing some time in documenting your processes and making sure that every current treasurer has something really solid to pass on to whoever their successors might be. So generally that will include depositing receipts, writing checks, issuing any kind of expenditures, maintaining internal records is really important, as well as taking the time to make sure that those sync up with your bank statements and that you resolve any discrepancies that might come up there. Probably preparing budget reports to share with the board or the membership, and be aware of any tax obligations. We'll touch on that next. It's unlikely that's something you have to worry about. And finally, ensuring compliance with campaign finance laws. We're a very large committee with a lot of activity in every election cycle. So we literally are audited pretty much every cycle. We know what's coming. And you know, we're prepared for that with all the documentation that we keep for years after each election. That's less likely to happen with the club, but it can happen. It's happened to clubs locally. And this being the world of politics, there are complaints that are lodged properly or not, and investigations can happen. And in almost all circumstances, when a club gets dinged, it's just because it has no idea that it was doing something wrong. So that's obviously what we want to try to prevent. So I'm going to spend the majority of my time on this last bullet here, really talking about how best to do that. But first, to touch on the IRS bit. Sorry to flash that logo so close to tax day. The good news here is that you probably don't have to have any kind of interaction with the IRS if you're a typical club. So these are some possible filing requirements that you might have, but the initial notice that you exist basically to the IRS, don't have to worry about it if your annual income is less than $25,000. For those that do have to do that notice, there are periodic reports, but again, don't have to do that if your income is below that level, or if you already file as a committee, state or federal committee, you're already putting the information out there as far as the IRS is concerned, so you don't have to do any additional reporting. Theoretically, there could be income tax, but if you are a political organization whose revenue is just contributions and dues, and I think that's pretty much all of the clubs here, no need to worry about that. One danger area is that if a club gets into the business of actually selling stuff, that's gonna raise some flags with the IRS and potentially the franchise tax board in California. So accept contributions, don't sell stuff. Generally seems to be a pretty safe harbor for clubs. And then finally, payroll taxes. There have been local clubs that for short periods of time have had employees. So of course that is an obligation for those that go down that road. There's a link here that gets into more details, plenty of information there on the IRS website for those of you who want to dig in a little deeper. So apart from the general responsibilities of a club treasurer, these are the responsibilities that are specific to campaign law, not just for the treasurer, but really other club leaders as well. So there's some broad knowledge of what's needed and an ability for people to kind of help each other out, keep an eye on things collectively at the board level for a club. First and foremost, you need to know whether you need to file as a committee. Once you trigger that, then that comes with a lot of ongoing obligations. That could be state or federal or both. And that can change year to year because that is based on political spending in a calendar year. I would recommend that a club figure out kind of for the foreseeable future what makes the most sense for you, what you want to be, and then make sure that you make decisions that align with that in terms of your activity and your spending. So if a club does have to or chooses to become a committee, that means that you will need to prepare reports that you'll file with the Secretary of State in the case of a state committee, or the FEC in the case of a federal committee. A committee also has other obligations, including disclaimers. In particular, when you're doing election-related communications, there is particular language that needs to be included there. And there can be other requirements too, including even fundraising requests have to come with certain wording. So that's all stuff for you to be aware of. And then finally, I know that clubs often do want to support the candidates that they endorse financially. Before making a contribution, definitely be aware of any restrictions on the recipient's end. Even if you're not a committee, this applies. There are, we'll talk about this later, but there are quite a number of local offices that cannot accept a contribution from any organization other than maybe the Democratic Party. There's an exception, but for a Democratic club or business or labor union, they cannot accept those. The campaign should know that, but that doesn't always happen. So we just recommend doing your homework. Everything's online, or it's a quick call to the city clerk or whoever it might be, just to make sure that that's a permissible contribution. So these are kind of the options that a club should be looking at. The most likely threshold that you would reach is the requirement to become a state committee. And that involves $2,000 or more in political spending in a calendar year. That will generally include contributions to campaigns, contributions to a party organization, independent spending that's not coordinated with the campaign. That will not include operating expenses, meeting expenses, and other things that are not explicitly electoral in nature. A lot of clubs already know that and kind of figure out where they want to be, but that is the current threshold. It's lower on the federal side, but that is spending that is specifically to influence federal elections. So basically, House of Representatives, U.S. Senate, or President. It's a little less likely that clubs will be hitting that threshold, but some of them definitely do. So a club could be either or both. Our treasurer recommends, because I checked with her this week just to freshen up some stuff here, and she recommends that if a club does qualify in both of those areas, they should actually have two separate committees. That does get quite a bit more complicated reporting wise in terms of how different expenses are allocated, but that's the kind of thing that if that applies to you and you want to talk separately, happy to do that. The third option is not even to get into it. And that's kind of my bottom line for clubs that really don't need to function as PACs that bundle their members' contributions just so they can write checks. So if a club's desire is not to do any of this, just make sure that you safely stay under those thresholds. And that does mean throughout the year, obviously starting with your budget, just keep an eye on what you're spending and what you're spending it on, and keep a little wiggle room just to make sure that you don't go over that. It's also a good idea, of course you should be anyway, keeping really good records, but when you do hit that threshold, if and when you do, then you'll actually need to go back and document all of that in your reporting. So want to make sure that you have that information that totals the 2,000 or more that you're reporting. So just to dive into the details for each of these kinds of committees a little bit more.
Right, real quick, Michelle had her hand raised, so I think it might be about what you just said.
Oh, sure. Okay, thanks.
Michelle, do you?
Thanks. Yeah, it was just a quick question. When clubs give money to the party for example, for the Freedom Banquet or for a particular function, does that count as giving it to the party, to that $2,000?
Yes, I would say it's safe to assume that it does. Even though you're kind of getting something for that, it is still a transfer from one committee to another, essentially. So I would add that up. That is something for clubs to keep an eye on, and I'll address that a little bit later. But one good way for clubs to do that is to organize individual contributions from their members instead of doing it through the club. But that is the most likely way for a club to quickly get to that threshold if they do that a few times a year. So that's a really good point.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So the definition is up here under the state law. The Fair Political Practices Commission in California is the agency that enforces the campaign finance laws. And the definition here is for the purpose of supporting or opposing one or more state or local candidates or ballot measures, or making contributions to any other political committee. Here are the different kinds of reports that a committee would file. There's an initial statement that's just a really short form with your treasurer's name, principal officer, the address, bank account info. That needs to happen within 10 days, no later than 10 days of hitting that threshold. That can happen anytime before that, of course, if you choose you want to do that. And then that's just an ongoing thing that stays active with the state. There's an annual fee. There are then periodic campaign statements that a club needs to file. It's called a Form 60. And you've probably seen these if you've done research on campaign finance backgrounds for campaigns. Contributions, expenditures, what's in the bank. In a non-election year, those are semi-annual. Well, every year those are semi-annual. And then prior to regular elections, there are multiple pre-election filings that get a little more frequent the closer to election day. So there's more disclosure at a time when campaign spending typically increases. So these will likely be electronic. And I know some clubs already are in the habit of doing that. Additionally, a state committee will have to file a late contribution report, also known as 24-hour reporting. And this is a very sort of detailed definition, but within 24 hours of $1,000 or more in total contributions to or from another state committee within 90 days of a regular election. So what that means for us is, in those months before the primary, and then again, the general, if we get a check for $500 from a state committee, and then, or for us as a party, it could be any donor, and then another check for $500. Once we hit that $1,000, that's immediately reportable within the day after the receipt. And then every dollar after that from that same donor during that same period is subject to the same reporting obligation. So it is great and useful for the public to have it all out there. This is a very easy area to miss something if you have a lot of stuff coming and going in particular. And so that's one to be aware of, be very careful about. If you are a committee, if you're in the position to make or receive a contribution in that amount during that time period, just make sure that all your ducks are in a row before you actually issue the contribution. Make sure you're prepared to report that. It's pretty easy to do, again, electronically. But if you miss it, you will eventually be dinged daily for late filing. And if it's a few days, that's not a huge hit. But for those who don't find this out until months or more after the fact, those fines can really add up. So that's something to be aware of. And then finally, there's other miscellaneous kinds of reports. amendments to the statement of organization, if you have a new name or treasurer, address, anything like that, that needs to be updated. And then if you decide that you no longer need to be or want to be a committee, there's a statement of termination. Until that is filed and accepted, a club is still subject to all the reporting requirements. So if you've got a committee that's been created and active, even if your spending patterns were reduced to the level that you no longer were required to keep reporting, if you're an active committee, you still have that obligation until you formally take the step of saying, okay, we're not gonna be this organization anymore as a committee. A few more requirements, mostly related to income and expense details. No cash contributions or payments of 100 or more. It's best to minimize cash altogether if you can, just so there's a paper trail of absolutely everything coming and going. I think you all know that contributions need to come with certain information from the donor. That requirement kicks in from individual contributions at $100 per year in the aggregate. So again, it could be 25 here and there, and then eventually they get to 100, and then you need to report that person's occupation, employer, and physical address. It's just a good practice to always get this all the time. So if you ever need it, you're going to have those records, you're going to have all those contributions attributed to that person, and then you can fully report all of the information that's required there. Also, when you're asking for money, that should include all the required information. So just remind that potential donor, hey, we need to collect this information as part of this request. Non-monetary contributions, also known as in-kind contributions, those as well should be reported either to the club if you're a committee, or from you to another club or the party or a campaign if they can accept that. So it's something of value that needs to be reported even if it's not cash. And then there is a requirement that documents on all of this stuff have to be kept for 4 years. So for us, that starts to take up a lot of space, but that's an important example of something where you want to make sure that you have some shared electronic files or some maker's boxes with all of that stuff going back years. So if you ever needed to produce documentation, that should all be there and well organized, so you can refer to it if you needed to. A little bit about independent expenditures. Most clubs don't do this, but for those who are filing as a committee, if you make expenditures on behalf of a candidate or against a candidate, those two need to be reported as IEs, not exactly contributions, but those will show in the same 460 reports, and those cannot be coordinated with the campaign. There's got to be a wall there. So that is important to know before you get into that kind of activity. Mentioned the disclaimers earlier, particularly for independent expenditures. Those requirements are pretty stringent. The state really wants to make sure that most voters assume that the mail or other messages they're getting are related to or maybe from the candidate that it's about. And so if it's from some other entity, it will be a little more obvious, here's who paid for this. And even if the name of the committee is deliberately kind of ambiguous, it'll have to say major funding from organizations that give it at a certain level, just to increase the transparency of who's really behind that. So those are applicable for most printed materials, signs, door hangers, other paid communications, including digital ads. All of this stuff is pretty well documented on the FPPC website. I'll share the link toward the end here. So there's a handy guide if you're this kind of organization and if you're looking at this kind of communication, here are the requirements. And those requirements include very specific language as well as formatting that can get right down to, okay, the text has to be this size and centered and in a box with the contrasting background, that kind of thing. All right, that's the state committee overview. A little bit about federal committees, which I think are somewhat less common for our clubs to have. Again, that threshold is lower. Non-connected basically means that that's an independent committee that's not linked up with a campaign in any way. Same amount of time, no later than 10 days after raising or spending more than $1,000 to influence federal elections in a calendar year. That's when you would need to file as a federal committee. And the process is very similar. Statement of organization, periodic reports. Those are more regular than the state reports, either monthly or quarterly. And again, those can be amended, and there's a termination report to file if you no longer want to be a committee. And of course, there can be fines for those as well. The other requirements are also very similar, just a little bit different in the details. I won't get into everything, but I'll just leave it here for you to refer to later. One thing that is worth noting is that for all intents and purposes, a state committee doesn't really have contribution limits. You can accept any amount from an individual or a business or labor union or any other PAC. Not so with federal committees. So those contributions are limited to money from individuals up to $5,000 per donor per calendar year, or other federal committees, campaigns, or other federal PACs. So that funding can be a little harder to come by, and you've probably heard me or Will or others with the party talk about the need to raise federal funds. That's critically important to us as a party organization, just because in the months before an election, very many of our expenses have to be paid for with those federal dollars. During periods, it's 100% of our payroll. It's a large percentage of our operating expenses, as well as anything that so much as mentions a federal candidate, mail, door hangers, has to be 100% federal. That is always a hurdle for us. That's why we start raising early as we can in the cycle, because by the time we get close to election day in November, that account is pretty well spent down. And then we start all over again to make sure that we can meet our obligations to keep operating at the level that we know we need to, and to have communications out there that include our whole slate. So we know we need to do that. We start planning early. And so for those of you who are helping out by attending party events or being members of the DEM program, that's exactly what that's supporting, so we can do our work. So thank you for everybody who helps with that throughout the year. That's the state and federal stuff. I do want to highlight a little bit more about local campaign rules than I did last time around, because I know that's something where it's pretty easy for clubs to get snagged. It's a very, very common question for me. I'm always happy to hear from somebody with a club that wants to make a contribution and they want to make sure that they're doing things the right way. At this point, San Diego County and a few school districts and most cities in the county have some kind of campaign contribution of their own. That could be just the amount. So in a city like Vista, that is capped at a few $100s, but it doesn't matter if it's from a club or a business or an individual. Or it could be, so I'm sorry, that would be the source, or it could be the amount. Where it's capped at a dollar limit, doesn't matter who it's from. And in many cases, it's both. Bottom line, check with a particular jurisdiction. This is something that has quietly been happening more in recent years. It used to be just a few cities. Now I think it's all but 3 or 4 of the 18 municipalities in the county have some kind of campaign finance rules, some kind of limits. A couple of them, I think, National City and Carlsbad just last year. There are some that had higher limits that they've decreased. So that, of course, can change over time. In every election cycle, it's worth refreshing that, just making sure that you are staying compliant. It's pretty easy to check, and I definitely recommend doing that. This is a good place to note that the city of San Diego is the only local jurisdiction that has a whole city agency devoted to enforcing its campaign finance regulations. They have a whole lot of rules of their own that are even more stringent than the state. So if you're active in any of the stuff in the city of San Diego in particular, check out the Ethics Commission website. They're very accessible if you have questions as well. And for all this stuff, the bottom line is figure out as much as you can before you do anything, just to make sure that you are coloring within lines and following all the local rules that might apply. I'll touch on some other contributions as well. When it comes to state legislature, there are limits in terms of the amount, but not the source. It could be an individual or an organization. Most of these limits are pegged to something like the consumer price index so that they are automatically increased over time. Currently, those are $4,900 per election for candidates for the state assembly or senate. This is something that's new, that just took effect this year actually, is the state passed and the governor signed a law that says if you're a city and you don't have your own contribution limits, the state legislative limits will apply. So effectively, even in those handful of local cities that don't have limits, they at least have this amount limit for city offices that a candidate for assembly or senate would have to follow until they may decide to add their own. The limits for governor are higher. The limits for other statewide offices lower than that. And it's worth noting, since we are coming up on a recall later this year, that that's a different kind of committee. There's no limit for those. So Governor Newsom will have a committee, and there will be others out there on both sides of that proposition. So the rules are a little different there. Federal limits are lower than all of these. Those again do have to be from individuals, up to $2,900 per election, or from other federal committees. The amounts there vary a little bit depending on the kind of committee. So that's an overview of the contribution limits that apply currently. Party organizations have been provided with special latitude by the courts over the years. So we often will have higher limits. We'll be able to give a direct contribution in cases where no other organization might, just because of the unique role that political parties have in organizing and campaigning. And that also means that we are lawfully able to coordinate a lot of campaign activities with the campaigns that we've endorsed. So that's extremely helpful. It's a role that we're really happy to have increasingly. And one of the big reasons that we've been able to be so successful is that we coordinate as much of this as we can to really have the biggest bang for our buck as we endorse. You know, in the last cycle, it was 161 candidates. It may be more still the next one. And so that's something that is really important that we're proud to be able to do. We can give direct contributions, again, even in jurisdictions that otherwise don't allow them from organizations. And especially at the city and county levels, you can see those limits are significantly higher. These are per election. And among other things, once we made an endorsement, this is a signal to our members and to the public that this is a candidate that we're really backing. And so we have a fund that we put together just to be able to do activity like this. And that makes a huge impact, especially in these races that can get expensive and that have, as you can see, relatively low individual contribution limits. Now is a good spot to talk a little bit about what we call member communications. So that is under a state law that allows all membership organizations, including political parties, to not have to adhere to spending limits as long as we're communicating with our members about our candidates that we support or oppose. So we do have a fund that we raise into apart from our operating budget just for this purpose. And the limitation has to be that that can only be spent to reach out directly to registered Democrats or other activities that support that. So that is a huge amount of our work in every election. And so that is something that we're always trying to build up. And we work with our candidates to raise that money into the party, knowing that once we made endorsements, we're going to do everything we can to help elect those folks. Another huge benefit is that unlike other organizations that can't give directly and could only otherwise do independent expenditures and just hope that their messaging is in sync and what it needs to be. When it comes to the party and our member comm stuff, this is fully coordinated with the campaigns. We work together on strategy and share vendors and plans, and that is hugely beneficial for everybody involved. And so that's a really important role that the party plays. One of the big reasons we've been able to to win so many local offices is exactly this. And of course, we're helped by the fact that we have a lot more members to communicate with than we did even just a few years ago. One thing that's really important to note, donors, we certainly encourage to contribute to our efforts overall, but cannot earmark donations and say this has to be spent a certain way. So typically this is an area where a lot of clubs do want to be helpful once the party starts to make endorsements. So I always recommend, I think this is a good, I hope this is a good overview of how this works, but I always recommend if a club is interested in doing something like this and figuring out its options, contact me and I'll kind of talk you through it. And a lot of that comes down to, well, here are the endorsements we made. Here's what we've done so far. Here's what we're trying to do. And broadly speaking, at the end of it, we've made a lot of endorsements and, we're doing what we can to help across the board. So I can always let a club know kind of here's what we're aiming to do in these races where we've endorsed. And then you can decide in general if you want to support the party's work. So I am pretty close to wrapping up this portion of it. So I just wanted to review the filing options for clubs. Really just depends on whether you want to be a PAC that gives substantial amounts of money, either to non-federal or to federal candidates or both. If you explicitly want to avoid the filing obligations, those are the thresholds to keep an eye on and make sure that you stay below those. With that said, I think some clubs do have paid treasurers. Most, it's a volunteer position on your board, but it's worth having an explicit conversation about that and making sure that you're weighing your options and doing what you need to do there. I would strongly advise this for a club that makes independent expenditures, just because there are lots of potential liabilities there and more rules to follow. Or if you're a club that does maintain both a federal and state PAC, probably worth having somebody professionally involved in the filings for those and just making sure that you are staying compliant. Cost-wise, it can really vary. Some treasurers charge by the hour. Some will have a monthly retainer and they agree on, okay, here's the club's budget or level of activity. So that could be $100 or a couple $100 a month for a club. It's a whole lot more for us, but that's certainly something where you can talk to a couple people, get some quotes and see if that's something that you need to do. Especially these days, but really in general, the location isn't too important. Our treasurers in Sacramento, and there's a handful of treasurers all over the state. If you decide to pursue that, always good to have a few conversations with people and figure out who would be the best fit for you. Most treasurers have particular software that they like to use for all their clients for reporting. So that may be something, if you hire a treasurer, that you'll additionally have to budget for. For those of you who do that, here are some examples of pretty common software where they actually generate the reports and handle the electronic filing and keep all those records in the system. Otherwise, it's perfectly fine just to use a standard bookkeeping program or Excel, just to make sure that you've got all those records backed up. When it comes to deciding how you're going to process credit card contributions that you accept, you just want to make sure that you're collecting all the info that you need from donors. So even if it's not a specific program like ActBlue that just does political contributions, even if it's PayPal or something else, you just want to make sure that you're getting that occupation, employer, and address that's there, and that you have all that to refer to if you need it. This link, sddemocrats.org/run, is actually a page that we set up with some resources for candidates, but one of those is a link to political treasurers. So if you go there and scroll down to the section on vendors, you'll see a link there to treasurers who we're not necessarily recommending, but they're folks that we know of who are actively doing this work in California. So now just to touch on some other best practices. These are good things to follow, even if you're not a committee, just for the fiscal health of the club. I won't get into everything here, but make sure that if you're collecting cash that you deposit it before spending it, so there's a record of that. as you probably do personally, check out bank statements and just make sure that there's no unauthorized transactions. Make sure that you are syncing up what is in your bank statements with what is in your internal records. You don't want to let that go and realize there's a discrepancy there and then have to figure out why way down the road. You definitely have to do that if you're a committee who's filing. And as with a lot of this stuff, it's just good to have some checks and balance. So it's good to have somebody looking at this other than a check signer, just so you have multiple people involved. It's always good to have a couple pairs of eyes when it comes to this. On the expense side, certainly limit the number of people who can sign checks. I think most clubs already do have that in their bylaws. Maybe it's even a second signature for a check of a certain amount. You might have to chase after invoices or receipts, but it's important to do that and keep track of everything. And that is it for the expenses. Record keeping, when in doubt, save everything. Check copies, credit card receipts, everything should be dated at the time that it's received. So you can always refer back to that. If it's an in-kind contribution, that should include a fair market value estimate and all those other details as if it were a monetary contribution. And yeah, really any of these details associated with money coming or going, you want to make sure you can refer back to if you need to. Here is a little bit more if you want to do your own research. These are the links for the FPPC and the FAC. They all have a large amount of resources there. Some videos, short reference guides, long campaign manuals. You will learn more than you ever might want to if you want to spend a few hours doing that. But it's a great way to delve in and just kind of see what all is involved for a committee. And then finally, I'm always glad to chat with anybody if you'd like. Our office number's on there. Ryan@sddemocrats.org is my email address. We have been working remotely since the election, but we are going back into the office starting next week. So you'll be able to call and probably reach somebody starting then. So I want to shift gears just a little bit before taking questions with an announcement about an upcoming event. Really excited to announce that we have a date set for this year's Roosevelt Honors. That is Saturday, July 31st at 7 p.m. We are, as we did last year, making this mostly a virtual event. Things are changing pretty quickly, but at this point of the COVID recovery, we didn't think it was a great idea to get 1,000 people together in a room as we usually do. But one thing we are doing a little differently this year is that we are having the presentation part of it in person. So a lot of our electeds, people giving and receiving awards, and some other special guests and speakers will be on stage together, and there will be a small distanced audience there. So there'll be a little bit more of that dynamic social feeling in the room. So even if most guests are participating remotely, we'll be getting a little closer to what you normally expect for that event. Location to be announced, but another different thing that we're doing this year is encouraging people to host not virtual, but actual house parties. And particularly, this is something that we hope our clubs are going to step up and do very often. About half or more of all of our guests at the Roosevelt dinner are clubs that want to make sure they're represented for this annual event, the single most important fundraiser that we have. And so for those of you who could do this, here's what that's going to look like. We're asking people to offer to host a house party that'll basically be a viewing party for the Roosevelt Honors. We will provide a kit that has adult beverages and snacks and other goodies, souvenirs for this event that you'll be able to distribute to guests while you're viewing the event. And then obviously a host can kind of put their own spin on it and offer whatever they like. We are asking for $100 per person as a house party ticket, and that's going to include all of those goodies for each attendee. That's a little higher than a basic individual ticket, which will not include all that stuff. That'll just have the link to view the event. So we're hoping that clubs will step up and do this. There's a lot of latitude as to how you might want to organize it, but I think we're getting just about to the point where a lot of people will be excited to get together safely in a small group now that the CDC and the state are loosening their requirements on that. So a few things to know about how we are framing this. Guests should definitely be fully vaccinated. House party hosts should set their own capacity and just let us know how many people that you're prepared to have at that venue, which may be a home or some other location of your choice. You can build your own guest list and let us know what that is, or you could just let us know, hey, I'm hosting, here's a limit, and for anyone who wants to sign up to this club affiliated event, they can do that through our website. And we're going to be on hand to provide logistical support around guest outreach, as well as the logistics, just to make sure that you're able to do all the streaming stuff well and enjoy the event with everybody. So more details to follow. I think this is the first time that we're officially putting all this out there, but I'm very excited to share this with you. We'll probably reach out to the clubs individually just to make sure that you all know about this, answer any questions, and then hopefully start to get some commitments to host. Or you can email roosevelt@sddemocrats.org, and we'll be happy to follow up with you that way. That is it for me. So I appreciate everyone's time, and glad to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks so much, Ryan. That was really helpful and informative, and I'm sure everyone felt the same way. I see Danny's hand raised. Danny, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to ask, just because our club is getting ready to do a fundraiser, and based on your presentation, my understanding of it is that as long as we don't raise $2,000 or more, we won't have to file a committee. Is that the kind of benchmark we're looking for when we do fundraisers?
Yeah, and it's really, the language is worded as raising or spending, but it's really the spending part. So if you have other activities that just involve, meetings or food or activism in the community or whatever, that's not explicitly political, that doesn't count at all toward that 2,000. So it really is practically going to be contributions or expenses that are about a candidate or that involve the party.
Yeah, just to clarify, Danny, your fundraiser is just for the club in general, right? Or were you saying a fundraiser for a candidate?
For the club itself, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think, Ryan, if it were a fundraiser for a specific candidate, then that would be more of the like raising for a political purpose, right?
Yeah, and there's different ways to do this, of course, but if a club is just organizing it, but the contributions are coming from individuals and going directly to the campaign, of course, that doesn't count toward that 2,000. That's just the club facilitating contributions from its members.
Great. It's 1,000 for federal though, right?
Exactly.
And then I see next is Steve.
Wow, thank you. So Ryan, easy question, hopefully. The info on the Roosevelt dinner. I know you put out Roosevelt at sddemocrats.org. Is there anything online or so I could get all those stats again just about the Roosevelt dinner and setting that up?
I'm glad you asked. We are working on that now. I expect that'll be live this week. So everyone here is just getting a little sneak peek, but we're definitely going to spread the word to you and everybody else. So I appreciate your readiness to jump in on that.
Thank you. Okay.
Paula?
Yes, thank you. I'm going back to how this, we collect funds and give them to the party, to the local, San Diego Dems for the Roosevelt dinner. So those contributions came to us and we passed them through to the Dem party for the Roosevelt dinner. So we would have to file that if it exceeded $2,000, but if it was under $2,000, we would just have to keep the records and not have to file all the forms.
Correct.
Unless those contributions were in excess of $100 from one individual. We would have had to form, or we would have had to file those with the FFP, you know, like the 410 and all that kind of stuff.
You would take all those records and then document, okay, here's the $2,100 that we've raised this year, and here's who it came from, and here's how we spent it.
Right, but if an individual gave us more than $100 for a Roosevelt dinner, because they were contributing, you know, to the pot so that we had a table or whatever, and that individual exceeded $100, then we would have had to claim that on the form, right, and report it.
You would have to attribute the contribution to that individual. And if you didn't collect their occupation and employer at the time when they gave earlier, that's the kind of thing where you should reach out to them and get the info at that point.
And I mean, if we hadn't filed those forms within a certain amount of time, we would have to do it. I mean, are those quarterly reports? I can't remember. I know I did that when I was running my own campaign, but I haven't done it for a while, so.
And it seems like there's always one due. But
I know, it's right. That's
yeah, they're always twice a year.
Okay.
So there's one for the period from January through June that's due a little after that. And then there's a year-end one for the second half of the year. And then in addition to that, there's a couple reports before each election. So next year, there's going to be multiple reports that everyone has to file.
Thank you. It's actually the date of when we have to, you know, set ourselves up as a committee, because we're doing those pass-throughs, right? That's really key, because if you don't do it within a certain time frame, then you can get dinged on it, correct?
Yeah, and again, it goes back to fundamentally figuring out, like, what do you want to do as a club to fulfill your mission?
If you came in after the club already was doing stuff, then it's a little too late for that. I mean, that's the right sequence of events to do, to really figure it out in the forefront of your club's activities. But if you are not the person who made those decisions, it's kind of too late. So I get it.
Yeah, so that's always something that you can reevaluate. You probably don't want to swing back and forth between filing and not year to year. So even if you are not looking at a whole lot of activity this year, if that's something that you think is going to be in your interest to do long term, you can go ahead, and you certainly don't have to wait for that $2,000 mark. You can just go ahead and do that now and get in the habit of filing.
All right, thank you.
Ryan, I had a quick follow-up on that. If the club gives a contribution to the county party for the Roosevelt honors, does the party consider that a state or a federal contribution?
Good question. And if a club is giving it to us as a federal committee, we will gladly put that in our federal account. Otherwise, that's considered a state contribution for us.
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, and then let's see.
And I'm catching up on the chat finally, and I see, Lauren, you had a question. If a club is not going to make any political contributions, what are you required to file? You're not. Just keep track. If expenses just have to do with all those other kinds of activity that don't involve candidates or the political party, then no need to file.
Right.
Great. Can I ask one other question? Just a quick question. Our treasurer recently left, and I was intrigued that you said a lot of clubs have it in their bylaws, the role of treasurer, and we are struggling a little because we do not have anything like that. So if any clubs do have that in their bylaws, if you could just put your name of your club in the chat, if your bylaws, I'd love to look at some examples of that, because that's a really good idea. Because our new treasurer is like, what do we do? And our records weren't great. And I don't think we had a monitoring system to know the treasurer was doing her job, and everyone's busy. So we're going to start to have some kind of checks and balances to make sure we're doing things correctly. I don't think anything was wrong, but I realized, like, oh, the records aren't great. And anyways, so we need to tighten things up again. So thank you so much for having this. For our club, it just could not have come at a better time.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thanks.
Lauren, I would say for the San Diego County Young Dems, we actually renamed our elected treasurer as finance director because we have a professional treasurer and it just gets kind of confusing. But we have some info in there about their roles. And at the end, we also have some of what Ryan mentioned where we outline, expenditures in excess of $20 need approval of the president, in excess of 100 need the board, in excess of 1,000 need a vote of the membership, things like that might be helpful for you. I just put the link in there.
Great, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And thank you for posting the presentation. I already cut and pasted that, but that's in the chat now today. So thank you.
Great. And then Sinara. Dinar, are you there? Are you able to unmute? Oh, I think you just remuted. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. That was a great presentation. I have a question/suggestion for the Roosevelt dinner. So I represent a fairly small club, the Blue Dream Dem Club. But I could totally see us doing a house party for this and having our own party favors, adult party favors, and just having a really fun time at the Roosevelt dinner and having those $100 contributions. That said, it's probably not worth it to us to become a PAC in order to do this. So what I'd like to suggest that we put out there is if there's a way that the party could make possibly different pages for clubs that want to have house parties, so that when the donation is made, it's earmarked to that club, but it still goes directly to the Democratic Party. So there's some sort of note that this is for the Blue Dream Democratic House Party. So I know in NGP Van you can make different pages. My hope and suggestion is maybe you could make a separate donation page for the Democratic Party for the clubs that would like them, so that when they click on that button, I can embed that page in our webpage, or I could direct people to it. And when members click on that button, they know they're giving to the Blue Dream Democratic Club house party, but at the same time, the donation goes directly to you because, again, it's not worth it to me to form a PAC to support the Roosevelt dinner. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you sound a little bit muffled, but I think I have that, and that's a great distinction. What we're going to do starting out, just to see how this works, is to have the option to pay for a house party altogether on our pay page, or for someone to pay for an individual ticket, and then there'll be a field to put in the club or other affiliation. So it'll kind of be like, what we did back, when we had a bunch of tables in the room, is a lot of people would pay individually, they name their club, and now instead of putting all those people at the same table, we'll just put them at the same house party. So I hope that gets to what you're asking about.
Yes, no, that will do it. We'll just direct our club members to put in that field for the Blue Dream Democratic Club house party, and then we'll follow up to make sure that they've done it.
Perfect, and we'll help with that too.
Great. I don't see any other hands raised, but I want to give anyone a chance if there were any last minute questions for Ryan. Not seeing any. I will just go ahead and say again, thank you, Ryan, so much for being here and giving that presentation again. I know a lot of clubs have reached out recently about, questions about finance. We have a lot of new club leaders and treasurers, so I think that this has been very helpful.
Really glad to be here, and thank you all for the good work that you do.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna just go ahead and see if anyone wants to give an announcement about their club or anything else. Please go ahead and raise your hand now. I'll give each person a minute, and just give me 1 sec while I bring up a clock here. Okay, I think folks should be able to see my screen. I see Indro, if you want to go ahead.
Cody, can I share my screen? I got something to.
Oh, actually, yeah, go ahead. I think you're a co-host, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can everyone see this lovely flyer here on the right-hand side?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'll be real quick. Something we've had, first off, Judy, Ryan, amazing presentations. Something we've had kind of cooking at the AAPI Dem Club is something that is celebrating Congressman Andy Kim and doing a conversation with him. Now, most of you remember this image that you'll see in the upper right-hand corner where Congressman Kim, right after the January 6th insurrection, basically left his office and went and started cleaning the rotunda. It's a viral photo, and he did this completely unprompted, and it shows how strong of a servant leader he is and how amazing he is as just a general human being. So we wanted to bring him down to Southern California. So what we've done is our group, the AAPI San Diego Democrats, the California Young Democrats AAPI Caucus, the Korean American Democratic Club, the California Democratic Party AAPI Caucus, the Filipino American LA Democrats, the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, and the San Diego Democratic Party are going to be hosting a conversation with Andy Kim next week. It'll be on May 22nd from 2 to 3 p.m. I'll put this flyer in the chat, but just click the RSVP, you fill out a little bit of form, fill out a quick form. You'll get a Zoom link sent to you, but we invite anyone to come in. Again, really celebrating Congressman Andy Kim, AAPI Heritage Month, and we're really excited about this. And I do want to point out that most of this was done in coordination with these other clubs due to the work of our VP Junsu. So I always want to make sure that he gets credit for this. So again, May 22nd from 2 to 3 p.m., a conversation with Congressman Andy Kim, celebrating AAPI Heritage Month and his amazing work. So I'll put that in the chat. Sorry, I think I went over a minute.
No worries. Thank you. Okay, next I see Deborah.
Hi, San Diego. I just wanted to talk a little bit about convention. I really enjoyed the Jedi trainings. Their focus on implicit bias I thought were very helpful, and I hope they expand upon it so we can keep growing as a party. I had 2 volunteers of the year for Region 18, one right from San Diego, and that's Rob Howard. Make sure you congratulate him for all the work that he does. And also to remind you, the standing committee applications are available online. Most of you should have received applications. If not, go to this CDP website and you will find that information. And that's it for my report. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I didn't want to limit you, Deborah, because you're one of our party leaders. So, but thank you so much. And then, okay, next I see Kent. I'm going to go back and share my screen here. Kent, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so just quickly from a different hat, on behalf of the San Diego Asian Pacific Islander Coalition, and just feeling like it's relevant with Judy's presentation, they're actually hosting a community conversation on June 3rd, which is a forum for the public, sort of a flip from a lot of the events during the month where we've seen a lot of elected speak. We're looking actually to invite community members, allies, supporters to just talk about issues that are important driving the AAPI community moving forward, and using that feedback to help prioritize what the AAPI Coalition is going to be doing in the year ahead. So I'll just post the Facebook link in the chat. It's going to be on Zoom on Thursday, June 3rd, and invite anyone who's interested to share it or attend. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Next I see Sonara. Sonara, are you there?
Okay, hi. Yes, I'm here. So I just wanted to announce to everybody, I'm not just the president of the Blue Dream Democratic Club, I'm also the South Region Go Team coordinator for the Democratic Party. And the Go Team is the grassroots, it is our boots on the ground, it is our Democratic volunteers that are out there touching voters. And in that capacity, I'm a member of the recruiting committee, where we're trying to recruit new people to the Go Team. And at our first meeting, a working group meeting of the recruiting committee, we identified the clubs as our most important ally and our most important source of volunteers for the Democratic Party. So we've noticed that with clubs where we have a strong Go Team liaison, where we have a strong connection, we have a lot more activity. So one of our priorities is going to be reaching out to different Democratic clubs, working with their Go-Team liaison, making sure everyone has a Go-Team liaison at each club. So you're going to be hearing from me or other members of the recruiting committee fairly soon. And so I just wanted to get that out there and have people start thinking about it because, you know, we really appreciate the partnership with the clubs. And where a club has a official Go-Team liaison that's excited about the job, we're able to make a lot bigger influence in the community. So if your club does not yet have a Go-Team liaison, please start thinking about who you would like to assign. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sonara. Next, I see Danny.
Hey guys, I just wanted to thank Ryan and Judy again for that wonderful presentation, and to let everyone know that I am the president of the Downtown Democratic Club, where we are going to be having our next club meeting will be on the second Monday of June. So that I believe is the 14th. And we're actually going to be having a topic on the waterfront of San Diego, the future of the waterfront. And we're going to bring a commissioner to come talk about what the new development will look like in coming years, and what kind of the downtown waterfront will look like in the next coming years. So if you're interested in that, feel free to register. I will add the link in the chat so that you guys can join us. And yeah, I appreciate everyone's attendance today, and go Democrats. Talk to you guys soon.
Great, thanks. I see Richard next.
Okay, hello everybody. Richard Rom with San Diego County Democrats for Environmental Action. Just want to announce that our May meeting is coming up this Wednesday, the 19th, beginning at 6:30 p.m. We'll be hosting a panel on the outdoors opportunities within San Diego County about our state parks, our county parks, and our national forest. So we have representatives from the California State Parks, from the Cleveland National Forest, from San Diego County Department of Parks and Recreation. And they'll be taking everybody's questions that you have about camping and hiking opportunities. So we're looking forward to that. I know a lot of people are looking forward to getting outdoors. The weather's getting better, the pandemic's over, and we're also going to be announcing an upcoming hike with the club, which is still to be announced, but we'll have some really good meeting. And again, that's at 6:30 on this coming Wednesday. I'll put the link down in the chat to our Facebook event. Thanks.
Thank you. I see Nadia.
Hi everyone, Nadia Kina, you, she, her, hers. I'm just coming on really quick to advise you all that the theme of our club this year is community service and uplifting our community. And because of that, we volunteer with the MAC project the second Thursday of every month at 7:30 a.m. If you'd like to come out, go ahead and email me, nadia1015@gmail.com, and we can set you up. I also want to put on a separate hat and tell you that South Bay Alliance is putting on South Bay Pride this year. South Bay Pride encompasses Coronado, IB, Chula Vista, National City, Paradise Hills, and basically anywhere south of Southeast San Diego. So if your club would like a booth there, go ahead and hit me up. We will be there along with several different organizations, and you can set up. There is a booth fee, and we are limiting based on the size of how we plan to have it. So if you need anything, just ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia. Is there anyone else? I don't see any other hands raised. Okay, I'm real quick. I saw in here, I'm just trying to find it. I know Elise had an announcement about AAPI. There we go. At noon, AAPI San Diego has a meet and greet with California State Board of Equalization member Malia Cohen. The link is on the BAPAC SC Facebook account. So if anyone wants to head over to that, please feel free to do so. And then, yeah, Indra put a link to the API flyer with Andy Kim. So great. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you all being here, learning about API Heritage and club finances. So thank you, and we'll see you next month. And if anyone did miss this from your club who wanted it, it is being recorded. So once that's available, I'll send that out in our newsletter. So yeah, thanks. Have a good rest of your Saturday.